Kelly Smith. If I said to you, what does mindful in minutes mean, not only to yourself, but to your audience, what would your answer be?
Mindful minutes to me is about creating this little micro habit that you can fit into your day that makes a really big impact through just a few minutes of meditation and being present with yourself.
Now, for our FBP family, they might be like, what are they talking about? What is Mindful in Minutes? Well, it is a podcast that you're the host of. And I'd love for you to tell our FBP family what has inspired you to start this podcast.
I started this podcast over 5 years ago. I used to own a yoga studio and I had to sell it when we moved for my husband's job. And when I did that and we moved to a different part of the US, I was really wanting to find a way to connect with my students back in Missouri, where this studio was. And I felt like a good way to be able to continue to share guided meditations like I would in my classes was to start recording them and just putting them out on the internet. And I was a podcast listener at the time, and I thought, you know what, this is perfect for an audio medium like a guided meditation. So I just started putting them up on a podcast feed. I called it Mindful in Minutes, and it just continued to grow and blossom. But it really just started as a way to still be able to share with my students, even though we were now very far away from one another.
Well, I'm a little envious because I'm always very proud of the amount of downloads that we get here at the Fitness Business Podcast. But I think I saw that you have about 100,000 downloads a week.
Well, you should be proud of whatever download numbers you get. No matter what that number is, big or small, you should. But yes, I am definitely really proud and excited to be meditating with so many people every week.
Well, that's awesome. Well, listen, no doubt you are a industry expert. That's why we have you on the Fitness Business Podcast today. So I'd like to get your insight on how do you see, podcast fitting into a successful fitness business?
I see podcasting as this opportunity to kind of be a value add to things that you're already doing. So if there's something that you're known for, so like for me, it was my yoga classes, but also, the guided meditations that I was incorporating into these classes, into these practices. And I think it's a way to add value, free value to your current students and clients, but also new ones too. And I think it's a way of giving people this just this nice way into learning more about you, to sample what it is that you do, what you're known for, and to really invite them into your community and to have that little value add.
I want to just kind of jump ship for a second. And
Mhm.
as I ask you these questions, I want you to talk about the importance of consistency in podcasting, because I find that's one of the things that when people ask me about the success, my number one thing is consistency. So before I ask you your next question about, podcasting and branding, I'd like to interject with, what are your thoughts on being consistent with your episodes?
I couldn't agree more. I always say, the same thing, that consistency is so important. You're building community through a podcast. And I also, podcasting often is a slow burn. So it's not like I released my first episode and then there were, tens or hundreds of thousands of people listening. There was like 20 people listening, and probably 10 of those downloads were my mom. And it's just like you have to start somewhere. And podcasting really can be a slow burn. You just show up every day and you do the work. It's a lot of hard work, as you know. And you're just kind of building this community. You're building this library of content, of useful information that then people can listen to at any time. And that's a piece that I think is really cool, is you never know which episode is going to be the one that's really going to speak to someone and pull them into your circle and then want to continue to explore. So being consistent with that content, I think, is so crucial to success in podcasting.
Okay, so let's take this a step further with the consistency. How quickly would you say someone that starts podcasting should kind of expect it to help boost their brand?
So I don't know if everyone's going to like this answer, but I feel really strongly that things start happening around the 2 year mark. And I know a lot of people are probably thinking, Kelly, 2 years? I don't have 2 years. So I would say that by and large, working with my own podcast, also working with a lot of people like through mentorships and podcasting and things like that. Around that 2 year mark, something special starts to happen. And I think a few things that are contributing to that is one, you've built up a great library of content at that point. You'll have around, if you're doing weekly, around 100-ish episodes. So people feel like there's a lot there for them. You've built up a community, and there's so much power in educating your listeners and letting them know how you grow at the speed of their recommendations, and that sometimes that snowball effect takes time. But to really see, sometimes it can happen sooner, but I like to really give people realistic expectations. And if you're going to start a podcast, I would be in it for the long haul and to stick it out. And things will start to happen around the 1 year mark. Things will really start to happen around the 2 year mark, in my experience.
And I have to agree with that in the sense of, so Fitness Business Podcast has been around for 7 years. I was
Mhm.
not the original host. We shifted a few years ago, and even personally as the host, I feel like it took me, I'm definitely a different person than when I first started. Definitely was a different person my second year than my first year. Now I'm in my third year and I've grown. So not only has
Mhm.
the podcast grown and our guests have grown, but I feel like as a host, I have grown. Can you give any advice out there to someone that maybe just started a podcast or wants to, just about what it's like being the host and being able to get questions together and diving deeper and getting people to listen and follow along?
Yeah, so it's definitely a lot of work. Again, I like to give people realistic expectations. It can be so wonderful and so rewarding. But podcast takes time, it takes work. I also think like the more connected you are to yourself and the better you know yourself, the easier it is to show up and be that person when you're podcasting. So if you're interviewing someone, you have a particular way about you, a certain vibe, a way you chat with people. And I think authenticity really speaks for itself, especially in podcasting. Like it's such an intimate experience to be in someone's ears and having them listen to your voice and your thoughts and what you have to say. And so I think the more connected that you are to yourself, the easier that process becomes. And the more that your messaging is going to resonate with your audience. Because like people can feel when someone's authentic and just genuinely passionate about what it is that they're doing and they're sharing on their show.
Do you have any tips for somebody that wants to start a podcast, or maybe they're just brand new to podcasting?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend thinking about what you want, kind of your niche or your umbrella or whatever it is, what you want your show to be about. And if you already have a fitness business or you're kind of already in that world, thinking about what it is that you're already known for or what people ask you the most about. And then that will give you a good starting point as to what kind of a topic you want. And I always have people say before you launch your podcast, have like at least like 25 to 30 episode ideas or topic ideas and have this big list that you can pull from. And the other piece of advice is to be patient with yourself and to allow yourself to be human because, podcasting is something where you learn as you go, you evolve as you go, you'll change as you go. My first episode of Mindful Minutes 5.5 years ago is different than, the one that will come out in a week or so. And it's because you're learning how to do something different and just be soft and patient with yourself as you navigate that.
So true. I can relate to you with that so much. All right. So let's talk about a timeline. You touched just there a little bit on it, but let's look at a timeline. First 30 days, first 90 days, and then first year. What
Mhm.
what do you think that looks like as somebody sets up a podcast?
So I think a lot of the work, even if we look at like taking one step back, we'll say the first like negative 60 days. Like so much of the work before you actually even get to the first 30 days is going to be done behind the scenes before you even release your first episode. So that is, thinking about what you want this podcast to be about, what you're going to call it, creating the cover work, maybe talking about it on social media, letting people know you're launching a podcast, it's going to be released on this day, and all of that. So doing all that back end work first. Then your first 30 days is really going to be about just getting the word out there, most likely with your existing audience. So letting people know that this is a new thing that you're doing and start spreading that word on, social media. If you have any, connections anywhere, friends that can share it, things like that. It's really just about getting the word out and you personally process because there will be wrinkles and that's absolutely fine. It's a really steep learning curve in like that first month, those first few episodes. Yeah. So after you've done that pre work, then you're going to dive into your first 30 days. And that's all about getting the word out. So that is sharing on social media, working any connections that you have to help spread the word, and just let your existing audience know this is a thing that you're doing now. And then kind of ironing out the wrinkles through the podcasting process because you will have them. So that's really your first 30 days. Then your 90 days is going to be always educating your audience, have them share, you continue to share, get the word out, but really creating some great episodes and content that speaks to whatever the topic of your show is. Give people good value in that and really focusing on like the content of your show and making it really strong. Over your first year, that's where you're going to have some more time to continue to grow and evolve. Maybe things will change and shift a little bit, but that's where you may want to start expanding into maybe some more traditional marketing for podcasts. So maybe you're going to be an interview on someone else's show, or maybe you're going to do some kind of like a crossover or an Instagram live talking about your podcast or an episode or collaborating with other guests, things like that. And you have more of that long term to kind of do more, quote, like traditional podcast marketing to get the word out now that you've really started to bank up some really great episodes for people to go and explore.
And podcasting, really allows for the host, to have their own unique voice, right? And their perspective. And now there's just, I mean, hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there. How do you make your podcast stand out? And actually, along with that, is do you have any advice on how, just in general, to get your podcast to stand out?
So one thing again is that consistency piece. I think with my show in particular, there's, over 350 free guided meditations on there. And I think like that's such a big library that it does stand out because podcasting is a lot of work. Not everyone is going to stick with it. But if you do stick with it and you're consistent, you continue to give this really great content and value, that in and of itself will help you stand out in the long run. I also think that, and this comes up because the yoga space, the mindfulness space, the fitness space, like it is saturated, yes. But I always think, like when I'm teaching teachers, I tell people, there's a teacher for every student and a student for every teacher, but not every teacher is for every student and vice versa. So remembering that even if, you may not be the first one to ever think of this general, I think of true crime podcast or something, right? You may not be creating the first original true crime podcast. There's a lot out there, but no one will share that information or tell that story the way that you would with your unique lens and your unique voice. And remember that you do have something to share and to remain authentic in the way that you share that information because you will always stand out for doing that. And that's what helps to build connection with your audience as well, is that they really get to know you. And honestly, I think that's really it. Like authenticity really speaks for itself and it resonates with people.
Yeah, I agree. Not every host is for
Mhm.
every audience out there.
Yeah.
I'd be a fool to think that everybody that listens to the Fitness Business Podcast, connects with me. We do our best, we try, but that's just the way the world is. I'd like for you, Kelly, as a business owner, maybe to speak to all of our other business owners out there listening right now and giving them some advice on how podcasting can help grow a location independent business.
Yeah, so my business Yoga for You is completely location independent. So I don't have like a physical address. It's a yoga and meditation school. And I find that podcasting in particular is great for growing a location independent business because the people that you're speaking to already through a podcast, that in and of itself is a location independent medium. So you can be listening to people all over the world. You can be listening to them in everywhere in, different countries, different areas of your country, whatever it is. And if people are already used to listening to you or engaging with your work in a way that isn't, dependent on a specific location, they're already used to doing that. That's the hardest part. And so they're used to consuming your information in that way. So I think it makes so much sense that if you are location independent, to do something like a podcast that is also location independent. And then it makes sense with your audience to continue to engage in your work in that way. So whether you have a training or maybe you write a book or you do virtual classes or whatever it is, you can do all of those things with anyone across the globe. And podcasting is the same. So you're kind of casting this global net for your location independent work.
What mistakes maybe have you learned from along the way that you could share with our audience?
I would say, I mean, there's a lot because as you do, you make mistakes and you learn. One would be being afraid to really take an opinion on anything. Not that you have to be like superly overly opinionated to be a podcaster. However, I think that when you try to appeal to everyone, you end up kind of appealing to no one. So I do think that it's okay to sometimes infuse your personal opinions into things, to share your personal experience, and to not be afraid to, rock the boat a little bit. There's definitely that. Um, I mean, honestly, that's the biggest one. And also, you know what? This isn't even necessarily a mistake. It kind of falls more in like the fear category. But this kind of goes with, I hear from a lot of people, they're worried about feedback that they may get, one-star reviews, things like that. It's going to happen. And so we call this over in my podcast being someone's goat cheese. Like, don't be afraid to be someone's goat cheese, which means don't be afraid to be something that some people love and, some people detest and some people just are like, meh. Like you will always be goat cheese to someone, which means different. I personally don't care for goat cheese, so I just don't buy it. But I have friends that absolutely love goat cheese and they're obsessed. It's not goat cheese fault. It's just it is what it is. And so I think when it comes to, worrying about feedback or one-star reviews or people's opinions, it's going to happen. And I think I let that get to me more when I first, like when I got that first like one-star review, it just felt like a dagger to the heart. And, you know, they still sting a little bit, but I think I just let it bother me a little bit too much at the beginning and let that impact what I was doing. So don't be afraid to be someone's goat cheese. You will be to, there'll be someone out there who doesn't like what you're doing, and that's fine. If they take the time to, try to roast you with a one-star review, that says more about them.
Well, thank you.
Especially for a meditation podcast. I'm like, maybe we need a little more meditation. This is a little aggressive.
Well, thank you for your honesty. I've really been trying to focus when I interview all these awesome, successful guests, such as yourself, to just maybe also teach something, teach something that you've learned along the way, because we all make mistakes. If you're going to put yourself out there, you're going to make mistakes. Doesn't mean it's the end of the world, just means you learn from it and move on. So I love when our industry experts kind of share something, some wise wisdom on how to pick yourself back up and keep going. So you did a great job with that. Now, before we end, I believe you also have a second podcast called Meditation Mama.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about you. You're not only a host of one, but two podcasts. You got me good on
Yes.
that.
So, Meditation Mama started as kind of a passion project when I was pregnant with my son, and it was a pandemic pregnancy. So, I had a lot of time alone and at home, not doing a whole lot. And I just started sharing the guided meditations that I was using during my pregnancy, especially during such like a high stress time of being pregnant during a pandemic. So it's definitely kind of a more very specific audience type podcast, and it is for fertility, prenatal, and postpartum meditation. So it is for people who are in that very specific period of life, and to help kind of support them through guided meditations that speak to what you experience in that particular phase of life. So that's my secondary podcast, definitely more of like a passion project and much more like specific as to who it speaks to, as opposed to Mindful in Minutes is, guided meditations for anxiety, insomnia, resilience, like a little bit more broad. This one's, pretty specific, and sometimes I like to have a little fun over there, like get a little woo woo, little soul baby meditation work where you can welcome in the soul of your baby. I have a bonus one that's like a womb clearing. So we have a little fun over there sometimes.
Well, that's awesome. You know what, Kelly, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know you're super busy. We really appreciate it here at the Fitness Business Podcast that, you come on and you just share all of your great expertise with our fellow FBP family. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for just letting me talk about something that I love so much and giving me the space to do so.
All right, Kelly, what are your three top tips for launching a successful podcast?
Number one, know who you want to speak to. What do you have to share, and who do you want to say it to? Get specific on that. When you try to appeal to everyone, you end up appealing to no one. Number two is going to be consistent and be in it for the long haul. So, weekly episodes, I find things start to happen around the 1 to 2 year mark. So, think about as you're starting this podcast, this is a thing that I'm going to be growing and cultivating for the next 2 years. So just being consistent and be in it for the long haul. It's podcasting is not a, get rich quick scheme. It is definitely a slow burn, and we love it for that. And then the third is, don't be afraid to be someone's goat cheese. Don't be afraid to, speak in an authentic way, to share your voice and to be something that is authentic and some people will love and some people won't care for as much, and that shouldn't change who you are or what you have to share.
Okay, that's a wrap. So we do a quote,
Awesome.
and I'm stealing this. Don't be someone's goat cheese.
It's
That is going to be your quote for the
love it.
episode. So that's what I keep writing here. So, oh my God,
Love it.
so
It's
that is
so
a fun quote.
well, and you know what? It rings so true to me because it's like, it's a divisive thing. It could also be, whatever, any kind of a divisive food. But it's like, I mean, with podcasting, it's like you share what you have to share. And some people are going to be like, oh my gosh, it was amazing. And some people will be like, I hated that. And some people are like, meh. And like, it's not goat cheese's fault. It just, it's authentic. And some people like it and some people not so much.